Good evening, Louisiana. This is Dr. Ryan Truchelut of WeatherTiger, and I'm here to bring you the very latest information on Hurricane Ida, which, as I'm sure you know, is a very dangerous storm that's going to head towards Louisiana on Sunday. I'll be breaking down the wind, surge, and rain impacts from this very dangerous storm. I'm going to allow a few minutes for the audience to come in, and I will get started in just about 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. There's a lot to cover tonight with Hurricane Ida. Again, I'm Dr. Ryan Truchelut, a meteorologist at WeatherTiger, and I'm bringing you the very latest on Hurricane Ida tonight, which is a very serious threat to Louisiana and also poses some threat of lesser impacts as far east as the western portions of the Florida Panhandle. So, with that, this is a infrared satellite image of Ida. Currently, Ida is crossing over the western tip of Cuba. Center of circulation is crossing land right now, but you wouldn't know it from the satellite image. Ida looks like it's continuing to intensify as it crosses the flattish tip of western Cuba, moving northwest into the south central Gulf of Mexico. Key messages for Hurricane Ida are where I'm going to start tonight. These are the most important preparedness information that the National Hurricane Center wants you to be aware of as you're preparing for this life-threatening storm across Louisiana. The first bullet point, they want you to know that there's life-threatening storm surge possibility across the coasts of Louisiana and Mississippi within the storm surge warning area that extends basically from south central Louisiana across southeastern Louisiana up through Lake Pontchartrain and along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Life-threatening storm surge of 10 to 15 feet is expected in that area. So if you've received an evacuation order, follow it, because this is going to be one of the stronger storms to ever strike Louisiana following the NHC forecast tonight. The second key message for the United States is that Ida is expected to be an extremely dangerous major hurricane. NHC is calling for a Category 4 when it reaches the coast of Louisiana, and hurricane force winds are expected in the hurricane warning area, which is again south central, southeastern Louisiana, including possibly in metropolitan New Orleans. So we're talking about the potential for catastrophic wind damage with those wind gusts exceeding 120 miles per hour even inland. And finally, the third key message for the United States is that Ida is going to produce very heavy rainfall along and east of the tracks Sunday and Monday, along the central Gulf Coast, and in fact, east into Mississippi and Alabama as well. And that's likely to cause some pretty notable flash flooding. So all the major hurricane risks are here: storm surge, winds, flooding. Ida is going to bring the heat for all three of those. So it's a full spectrum threat. This is the very latest track forecast as of the 7 o'clock Central Time intermediate advisory from the Hurricane Center. Maximum sustained winds, 80 miles per hour, a Category 1 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. Movement continues to be northwest at 15 miles per hour, as it has been for the last day. And that northwest track is going to continue over the next 48 hours or so, leading into landfall. So no big changes to the forecast track in the last day and a half. This is an overlay of the last 6 NHC tracks, and the timing and the landfall point, basically, tiny changes in the forecast track. No big changes in the past day and a half for what's going on with the track. Intensity forecast has been revised higher through the day today. Currently, here's the initial intensity of 80 mile per hour sustained winds, Cat 1. And when Ida gets into the southern Gulf of Mexico, it's forecast to continue intensifying rapidly. NHC forecast as of the 4 o'clock Central Time advisory, the last full advisory package issued by the NHC, is calling for peak intensity at landfall of 140 mile per hour sustained winds. And that, again, that could even go a little bit higher too. So that's a Category 4 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale, like Hurricane Laura last year. So a comparable wind and surge threat in terms of strength, not exactly the same in terms of track. I do want to emphasize that this is a high confidence forecast. I don't think we're going to see big changes to this forecast over the next 36 hours as we head into landfall. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. Basically, the steering environment that is moving Ida towards the Louisiana coast is basically just the interaction of the hurricane down here in the central Gulf of Mexico tomorrow afternoon, and this big ridge of high pressure that has steering winds coming around it in a clockwise direction like this, and it's basically this high pressure system that's just guiding Ida towards the Louisiana Gulf Coast. So there's not a lot of other players on the board here to throw monkey wrenches into the forecast, and I don't think we're going to see big changes. If you look at the modeling is very tightly clustered. Here's where Ida was a few hours ago, and if you look at our most reliable models, basically they all slot in here between Lafayette and New Orleans. So I think that's basically where the center of the track is going to go, somewhere in this range. Could be some shifts back and forth within that range, but I don't think we're going to see big changes to the forecast track. In terms of intensity, that too, unfortunately, is a high confidence forecast insofar as rapid intensification is tough to predict, but in this case, all the ingredients that lead into rapid intensification are present. So this is a map that overlays the hurricane forecast track with what's called oceanic heat content, which is a measure of both how warm the surface of the water is and how deep that warm water goes. And the darker the reds, oranges, yellows, and reds are higher areas of oceanic heat content. And this pocket right in here is the infamous loop current, where there's basically an eddy that's driving warm water down deep below the surface. So as Ida moves over this very warm and deep pocket of water, it's likely to continue intensifying at perhaps even at a faster rate than it has been. Overall, Ida is following this kind of avenue of high oceanic heat content, really the worst possible track for it to take on its way to New Orleans. So oceanic heat content, these black areas that cut off, it's because the water's shallow, but if you look at the water temperatures where the water is shallower, basically between 88 and 90 south of the Louisiana coastline. So even though the water's shallow, it's extremely warm. In terms of outflow, the upper level environment, there's basically no wind shear over this, forecast to be over the hurricane as it's in the Gulf of Mexico. And these are upper level winds, and you can see the winds fan out, and all the air that's coming into and up through the hurricane is being dumped out in the upper atmosphere in these big jets that are evacuating that air and ventilating the storm, and that is going to allow that rapid intensification to continue. So I don't think we're going to see big changes to the forecast. We should focus on impacts. We shouldn't be focusing, I think, at this point on what changes are going to occur to the forecast. Slight changes possible, big changes, unfortunately, I don't think so. So here's current visible and then into infrared imagery as the sun goes down. Again, center of the hurricane is right over land right now, but there's a big convective burst going up over the center. It's well organized on Cuban radar. Eyewall is developing here, so I think once this gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to be intensifying quickly, starting early tomorrow and continuing through at least early on Sunday. In terms of timing, this is the United States hurricane-specific model, HWRF. This is the latest run of the HWRF showing where it is now and then moving forward with time, continuing to intensify, likely reaching major hurricane status by the end of the day tomorrow. And this is one model's opinion, but it basically corroborates the NHC forecast of a Category 4 at landfall. Has minimum pressure in the 930s. Laura's minimum pressure at landfall was 938. So comparable, again, a comparable intensity to Hurricane Laura, although tracking further east than Hurricane Laura did last year. Okay, so let's get into impacts, because that's what we really need to be talking about. This is a pretty high confidence forecast now that there's going to be major surge, wind, and rain impacts for south central and southeastern Louisiana. So National Weather Service puts out a product called Hurricane Threats and Impacts, and we're going to walk through those hurricane threats and impacts one at a time and see where the worst is expected. So the first impact I want to talk about is storm surge. Ida is going to be a fairly large storm, and it's going to intensify to a major hurricane and be a major hurricane for at least probably 24 hours prior to landfall. So it's going to be driving a lot of water north towards the Gulf Coast along and east of the track. So all these areas that are highlighted in purple are areas where potential storm surge is greater than 9 feet above ground level. These areas highlighted in red are 6 to 9 feet, and areas in orange are 3 to 6 feet. So that's a very wide area of south central and southeastern Louisiana is our best guess right now. This is the NHC's kind of experimental peak storm surge forecast graphic, kind of trying to figure out what the most likely top surge is going to be in various ranges of the coast. Worst hit is probably going to be between mouth of the Mississippi and Morgan City. If you have the storm track coming up into Vermilion Bay, those winds are going to be the strongest perpendicular to the shore in that section of the southeastern Louisiana coastline. So 10 to 15 feet of surge is going to be absolutely a devastating event in those areas. And we're also talking about 7 to 11 feet here across eastern Louisiana as we're piling in water into those kind of southeast facing coasts with winds coming out of the southeast. Lake Pontchartrain, again, 4 to 7 feet. And we were even looking at 4 to 7 feet all the way across the Mississippi Gulf Coast and 2 to 4 feet of surge into Mobile Bay. For the Panhandle, they don't show this on the map, but probably you're talking about above normal tides of 1 to 2 feet for Pensacola, Fort Walton, Destin, and really probably all the way east to Apalachicola with that long fetch of southerly winds. So this is a plot that the NHC makes to kind of show how spatially, how much water is going to be above ground level, and basically you're talking about storm surge coming inland for most of south central and southeastern Louisiana is their expectation. This is basically a forecast of what the worst case scenario is, more or less. This is going to be only exceeded about 10% of the time. So this isn't really a forecast expectation. This is kind of a worst case scenario. Not everywhere is going to take the highest surge because not everywhere will get the eastern eye wall. But there's potential for 6 to 9 feet of surge inundation above ground level in much of southeastern Louisiana. And really the only protected areas are the levee areas. So that's obviously a major issue. If you have an evacuation order, please heed it. You don't want to be here for this storm. This isn't a storm that you want to ride out. You can hide from wind, but you need to run from water. You cannot hide from water. Water-related deaths are 90% of hurricane-related deaths. So Louisiana is certainly no stranger to devastating surge, and this is going to be a very serious event. The strength of this hurricane, again, comparable to Laura last year. So this is the wind threat. These areas that are highlighted in purple are the areas where there's potential for winds gusting greater than 110 miles per hour. And you can see that this extends well inland to Baton Rouge, New Orleans. Not all these areas are going to get 100 mile per hour plus wind gusts, but someone in here is going to get the core of a Category 4 hurricane, probably somewhere between Lafayette and New Orleans. Not everybody gets the core, of course. It's only a very small area that is going to get wind gusts of 120, 130 miles an hour plus, but somewhere in this range is going to get absolutely clobbered by winds, and it's going to be in this purple area. Potential for hurricane force wind gusts in this red area, strong tropical storm force wind gusts in orange, and weaker lower end tropical storm force wind gusts in yellow. We'll dial in more on wind threat tomorrow as maybe we can have a little more confidence in where this is going to come in. But this is the afternoon European model. Just one potential look at where the wind gusts could be exceeding 100 miles per hour. Kind of these areas highlighted in pink. This is a realistic look at maybe where that area of the highest wind gusts could be. And this hurricane force wind gusts are going to extend well inland, into southwestern Mississippi, even east central Louisiana. This is going to be an inland wind event too, much as Laura was for western Louisiana. Laura's wind track was like this, and we're talking about I think a similar strength. Inland wind event just shifted, maybe 150 miles to the east. So it's a very serious threat as well, even inland, and of course along the coast where Category 3 or 4 hurricane force winds could be occurring along the immediate coast. The flood threat, again, is also a very serious issue, and this is a higher confidence forecast too. Not everybody's going to get the core of the strongest winds, but rain impacts are going to spread over a wider area. So potential for extreme flooding rainfall is greatest in this area of southeastern Louisiana, highlighted in purple in the judgment of the National Weather Service. If you look at estimated rainfall totals with this storm, so Ida is going to slow down. It's going to be moving at 10 to 15 miles per hour. It's going to slow down as it turns, probably only be moving at 8 to 10 miles per hour as it begins to turn north and then northeast inland. And that place, that pivot, the eastern side of the track is going to get a lot of very heavy rainfall as there's kind of an atmospheric traffic jam. So this area highlighted in kind of the browns and darker browns, that's an area where 7 to 15 inches of rainfall is a good bet. Local totals, 15 inches or more, but a wide area of 8 to 10 inches certainly in this area. And that's going to cause some major issues. It has been a very wet year. I don't need to tell you, in Louisiana, most of southeastern Louisiana has had almost double normal rainfall, as well as along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Over the past 6 months, 195% of normal rainfall in New Orleans. And if you look at New Orleans' historical climatological record, this black line is rainfall over 2021 year to date. And it has been the second wettest year on record in New Orleans itself since 1893. So soil's already saturated. The pumps can only pump so much water. So even if you're inside a leveed area, the threat of freshwater flooding, of course, in New Orleans is omnipresent. So that's going to be a very serious threat as well for New Orleans too. So the area that the National Weather Service is highlighting is at the highest risk of flash flooding. This area in red, where soil is saturated, and you're talking about around 10 inches of rainfall on top of that. And then finally, I won't dwell on this, but there's also, as with any landfalling hurricane, there's a threat of tornadoes along and east of the center, especially in the outer bands. With that, I'm going to see if there are any questions. Will it be a Category 4? Yes, that is the official National Hurricane Center forecast. This black line is their official intensity forecast, and National Hurricane Center is showing a peak intensity of 140 mile per hour sustained winds into landfall in New Orleans. So, Category 3 is possible. Category 4 is, I would say, more likely. I wouldn't be surprised to see intensity tip a little bit higher. There's not really anything holding the intensity back other than time, just the time it's going to spend over water here in the next 42 hours or so, 48 hours. Okay, I think that is the only question I see. I will be back tomorrow to do another live video breaking down the impacts as they lie tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central, same bat time, same bat channel, and I'll be, looking, hopefully being able to be a little more specific about timing and impacts, local impacts, as Ida should be at that point somewhere up here in the Central Gulf and on approach to New Orleans. So on approach to South Central or Southeastern Louisiana, I should say. Okay, with that, I'm going to wrap up for the night. Thank you for watching. I'm Dr. Ryan Truchelut of WeatherTiger, and again, just please, if you're in the path of this storm, this is going to be a Category 4. It's going to be as likely as strong as Hurricane Laura as it's coming in. So if you're under an evacuation order, think about the devastation in southwestern Louisiana, in Laura last year, and whether you would want to remain in place for that kind of impact across south central or southeastern Louisiana. So please heed evacuation orders, and please be taking preparations to protect life and property, because this is a very dangerous storm. All right, with that, I'll wrap it up, and I will be back tomorrow night.